Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. I'm the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. And today I'm going to do a deep dive into a subject that is very, very near and dear to my heart, if not to my tongue and taste buds. And that is to share how I learned to taste anything, and how by extension, how it is that I learned to taste chocolate. Just a quick reminder, no matter where you're tuning in today, whether it's on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, please go into the chat. Let me know where you're connecting from. I'll get you up on the screen and I'll do a quick shout out saying hi. Thank you very much for being with me here today. And also to say, if you do have questions, pop them into the comments or the chats with chat. I think it's on YouTube, live chat, or LinkedIn or Facebook. And I will get your questions asked and answered during the course of the day. So what I want to do, I'm going to very, very quickly jump over to a slightly different view, is to point out that for every single one of the live streams I do, there is a post on TheChocolateLife.com. And so this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life Live right now. And so if you go there, this is what it is that you'll see. And if you click over onto this post, what you'll do is, here are all of the resources that I have posted in advance for today's live stream. Now, there are some things that I am going to be showing during the course of the day, course of this live stream. They're not currently posted on the Chocolate Life, but by the end of today, the other links, which I'm going to share with you, are going to be embedded into this page as resources. So just want to let you know. I want to thanks for saying hello to Teresa for letting me know she's connecting from Georgia. Teresa is a regular listener here, and also to Natalia Evangelista, who's connecting from Altamira in Brazil. For those of you who may know, I was in Altamira at Chocolate Xingu last month. Had a great time visiting the state of Pará. I was only there for a week, but I just fell in love with the people of Altamira, and looking forward to coming back, perhaps spending some more time in Belém, and just enjoyed Brazil very, very much. And so Natalia, thank you very much for being here today, as well as Mark, and who is connecting from Colorado. So with all that out of the way, thank you very much for everybody who's checking in. What I wanted, so I'm going to follow the sort of outline, which is here on the post. And if you haven't read it and you have the opportunity to read it, I'm not going to suggest that everybody try to go and try to read it over my shoulder here. You don't have to. That's one of the reasons why I post things. But I'm going to go through what it is that I'm going. We have some people who are connecting in Encore Coffee from Kansas City, Missouri. We resolved the Kansas City, Missouri last week. So having said all that, and going into the prologue, what I really want to do is actually get a little more personal and go back a little bit more in terms of my history when it comes to the prologue. And the first of it is, maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not, but I've been a fan of food. I wouldn't really call myself a foodie, but I've been an amateur chef, since my late teens. And in my early 20s, after I graduated from Rhode Island School of Design, I'm an art major, a photographer by training, and that will come up in a few minutes. One of the things that I did when I started traveling around is I started tasting what I thought of as iconic dishes. So I grew up in my household. My father, who grew up in Southern California, I believe went to Tijuana, went to the restaurant where the Caesar salad was invented, and he would make his own Caesar salad. And going to that wooden bowl, he'd cut garlic in half. He'd rub the inside of the bowl with fresh garlic. Just a very, very particular way of making a Caesar salad. And so one of the iconic foods that I would eat is anytime I went into a restaurant and there was a Caesar salad on the menu, I would order it. And so the idea was, how does this version of the Caesar salad compare with my memory of what a perfect Caesar, or my father's Caesar salad? And so I would come back to New York after my trips, and I'd try to create a Caesar salad. And just try to understand what the individual elements are. What's the ratio of garlic to anchovy to all the other ingredients, the cheese that needed to be in there, right? And how did that change based on the saltiness of the anchovy that I was using? All sorts of things like that. And I had a couple of other foods, and it's a really crazy combination. But again, I grew up in Southern California. So in addition to Caesar salad, guacamole. So no matter where I went, if guacamole is on the menu, I would try it, and I'd match it against my idea of what the perfect guacamole was. And the third one was a pecan pie, because pecan pie is, in my experience, surprisingly difficult to do well. And so I would order it, and just, again, the idea was, how does what I'm eating, how does it compare with my mental model for what a Caesar salad should be, or a pecan pie should be, or guacamole should be? And then how do I go about adding that into my repertoire so that I can make what I thought of as the perfect Caesar salad, or the perfect guacamole, or the perfect pecan pie? So this is all before I got into the world of chocolate. And so the prologue that you're looking at here talks about a little bit about the background of how I developed my first rating system. And when I developed my first rating system, one of the things that I was very, very careful to think about is I didn't want something that required a calculator. So the idea of, oh, here's an 83 out of 100, right? What does 83 mean, right? And if the calculator part of it is, what I might say is that the flavor of the chocolate is worth 40%, the texture is worth 20%, the aroma might be worth 15%, the way it looks might have a percentage value associated with it. And so what I do is I give each one of those vectors, each one of those characteristics, a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. And then what I would do is I'd need a calculator to be able to add them all up and multiply them by the weights and add them all up and arrive at a number. And it seemed to me that like a number like 89 only made sense if you had like hundreds of my reviews in front of you, so you knew sort of my background and what I thought an 89 might meet, but what it might mean, not what it might meet. But another important aspect of this for me was the idea that there is only a 2-point difference between an 87 rating and an 89 rating, right? And only a 2-point difference between an 89 rating and a 91 rating. But there's a huge psychological difference between a rating that starts with an 8 and starts with a 9. And how do I resolve that sort of tension? Is a 91, really a lot better than an 89? Is it more better, to use bad English? Is it more better than an 89 is compared with an 87? And so my first rating system just wanted to completely avoid all those kinds of complications. And so I was thinking about the question of value. So you're paying, $20 a pound, $40 a pound, $60 a pound for chocolate. Is what you're tasting, is it a good value for the amount of money that you're being asked to pay for it? And that was one of the key elements of my first rating system. And so if you go through here, the prologue, what you'll do is you'll find here are the 3 primary elements of my rating system. Yay. So you can get an idea about how I thought about it. And I just want to let you know that towards the bottom of it, if you haven't read it, there are in fact the actual ratings for each one of them. There were 7, right? So something went from extraordinary on one end, which means this is, like the best it can be, an exemplar of what's going on. The chocolate is transcendent. I did give it a numerical value just to give people an idea, but there was no numerical underpinnings to this. This was all just, this is extraordinary, all the way down to bad. And so the idea being that you could communicate value by saying, for $35 a pound, right, this represented a superior value for what you're eating. So, very, very different from the way other people were approaching it. Another aspect of this is I created a series of style categories. So a European Northern European style. So Belgium and Switzerland has a tendency to be lighter and sweeter than Southern European, which has a tendency to be darker and more bitter, and American, which happens to be, much more sweet, and, flavors are very forward and obvious. And then, so you could say is that for a Northern European style of chocolate at $35 a pound, this represented a good value. So you got an idea of, what a basic flavor profile might be in terms of the style, how much you should expect to pay for it, and then what what I thought the eating experience would be. And then for each individual product, I actually gave some tasting notes. So, but that was, really only part of the way there, right? Because this is the framework for how I'm going to rate it. But what I needed to do is I needed to understand how am I going to train my sense of taste. I mean, I knew that it was going to require just eating a lot of chocolate, and oh my, the sacrifices we all need to make in order to, follow our passion. Damn, I have to eat more chocolate today. But the difference between eating and tasting is that tasting is a conscious experience. And when you're tasting, what you're doing is you're thinking about the experiences. So you have what it is you're smelling, what it is you're tasting, how the chocolate evolves in flavor in your mouth over time. And you're also thinking to some extent about any secondary emotions that come up. So just again, for background, I spent my freshman year in college at a place called the Evergreen State College. And there I was introduced to a philosophy of art, a gentleman by the name of John Dewey, American philosopher of the early 20th century, and his book, Art is Experience. And so I think about the experiential aspect of thing. I want to feel things rather than think about things. And so this notion of, how do I feel about it as opposed to what do I think about it, it becomes very, very important to me in my way of thinking about not rating chocolate, but how I'm going to evolve how I think about tasting and how I'm going to train myself. Because remember, this is early 1990s, so mid 1990s, 94 through 98, thereabouts. And there's no place to go to school to learn how to taste chocolate. I mean, at the time I made the decision to become a professional chocolate critic, not only didn't I not know what I needed to learn, I didn't know who I could go to learn it from or where I could go to learn it from. And so I was making these things up as I went along. And so I dug back into my art school background, right? And the work of Joseph Albers. So I was a projectionist. And so I would sit through freshman art history on a Monday morning at 8 o'clock and project slides. And I would see dozens of these images from Joseph Albers, this series called Homage to the Square, right? And in addition, I had to take classes in the graphic design department, and I used a lot of color aid paper and a lot of color aid paints to do these kinds of exercises on my own. And the whole idea of this exploration of color theory is the notion of what I think of now as simultaneous contrast. That's what I describe it as. But the idea that if I were to change this brown that's right here, right, my perception to another brown, right, so somewhere between this greeny brown and this red. By the way, I'm slightly colorblind, and I'm slightly red-green colorblind, and I'm looking at this at a monitor. So you may be seeing colors that are very different from what it is that I'm seeing. And this is part of the challenge that we have. How do you know that the flavor that I'm tasting and the color that you're looking at, we're looking at the same things? We can't. There's no way to know. So there's just no way to know. But in any event, the idea being is if I change this brown for another color brown, my perception of all of these other colors is going to change. So for example, I could change this brown to a blue, right? And my perception of this red and this brown, right, and this tan color could change completely. Now, depending upon the blue, if there's any green in this brown, might become more green. If the different blue might become less green. But the whole idea of simultaneous contrast is that the other things which juxtapose what we're tasting, what we're looking at and what we're tasting, because it turns out this is a technique that chefs use. and they're very well aware of. I've got something. If I reduce the acidity, if I reduce the saltiness, right? Those are elements which are going to hide other flavors, and so these flavors might come to the fore. Or I need some salt, or I need some acidity to be able to bring some flavors to the fore. So this notion of simultaneous contrast is one that is embedded into the human nervous system. And it's something that we do every day, right? So I look and I say, this square here is redder than this square here. This square here is darker than this square here. This square here is lighter and more yellow than this square here. This looks to be a little greener than this square here. I mean, we do this. This car is farther away than this other car. That car is moving faster than some other car. Your blue shirt is bluer than my blue shirt is. We make these kinds of comparisons every day. The human nervous system has evolved over the course of millions of years to make comparisons, right? And, as I was writing this up, I was reminded that I had been introduced to this concept while I was living in Portland, Oregon, late 70s, early 80s, before I went to Rhode Island School of Design. A wildlife painter by the name of Jan Janoschik, and this is Jan here. He introduced me to this concept of simultaneous contrast years before I went to RISD, years before I was familiar with who Joseph Albers were. So if you want to, here's a link to Joseph Albers' Wikipedia page. Here's a link to Jan's website, and you've got a little bit of history, all right, for what it is that I have done. And I go over this concept here in the prologue. And what I do is I talk about the fact that most tasting systems are based on what I call a descriptive model. And the descriptive model is you put something in your mouth and you try to describe what it is that you're tasting. So you put something in your mouth and you go, I taste red fruit, right? And you try to identify what that red fruit is, right? That's the whole idea of the descriptive model, right? Ooh, I'm drinking something. This is a Bordeaux, or this is an Islay, single malt Scotch, right? The only way you get there, right, is by what I think of as training your taste memory. If you've never tasted something, you cannot identify it, right? So if you've never had jabuticaba, which is a Brazilian fruit, I'm sure that Natalia, Miss Evangelista, knows what jabuticaba is. I'm hoping she does. In any event, it's like one of my favorite fruits. That if you've never tasted jabuticaba and you taste something blind, you don't know what's in it, and there is jabuticaba in it, you're not going to be able to identify it. And so the idea of descriptive tasting is through exposure and repetition. Exposure and repetition. What you do is you train your taste memory. The idea being is that if you have trained your taste memory, what you can do is you can smell something, taste something, drink something, right? And that you will be able to identify, ooh, I've tasted this before, I've smelled this before, I've encountered this before. What you'll be able to do is recall what it is that you're tasting. Oh, this is jabuticaba, or this is cupuaçu, or this is cherries, for example, or this is a Bordeaux, or this is an Islay malt, as opposed to some other malt, Scotch. You need to have repetition and exposure, repetition, and a conscious determination. You need to be able to write things down. You need to be able to catalog them in your mind in a way that's going to enable you to recall them in the future. Now, I don't actually know that you need to be a super taster in order to do this well, right? Super tasting has to do with the number of taste buds on your tongue. Often it's correlated with a sensitivity to bitterness. It doesn't necessarily indicate that just because you have more taste buds, it means you can taste more stuff, right? You need to understand what those taste buds are. And as I say, often people who are super tasters are overly sensitive to bitter flavors, right? But the whole idea is, again, if you've never tasted something, you are never going to be able to identify it going forward. The comparative tasting method, on the other hand, let's jump back and make one point before I go into a broader description of, or actually not a broader, but a deeper description of what the comparative tasting method is that, and I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry about that. I'm sure I will get back to it when I go and I jump into it. So what I'm going to do is we're about a third of the way through. It's about where it is that I want it to be. And again, I want to thank everybody who's here. If anybody who's new, who's joining on, please let me know in the chat where you're calling in from. If you have a question, please also let me know. And I'd be happy to get your questions asked and answered. So what I want to do is I want to talk about the comparative tasting method and how I implemented it in practice in a way that made it possible for me to use as a tool, for me to train my own palate, but also as a social tool for general education. And this is a tool that, this is the approach that I use whenever I'm giving a tasting class. So I'm giving a tasting class, I'm using some version of the comparative tasting method in order to get my points across. So having said that, what I am going to do is I am going to post, after this is over, this PDF document. And it consists of 2 pages, right? So the first page is just the description of how it gets done, right? And the second page is the tasting mat that I use. And this is what I call the pyramid tasting method. And it's relatively simple, right? What you do is you start off with 4 chocolates, right? And in this particular case, I have 4 70% chocolates. And all of these 4 chocolates are made with beans from Brazil. It really doesn't matter how you organize this set of 4 chocolates. What's important when you start out is that they be themed. So all of them 70%, okay, would be a place to start, or all of them 75%, or all of them 90%. It doesn't really matter, right? The next thing you might say is all the chocolates are made using beans from a single country, right? So a single producing country, Brazil, Venezuela, again, it doesn't matter. It's just that they're themed the same way. Another one might be, I'm going to use 4 chocolates that are made by makers all from the same country. So I'm going to use all French chocolate makers, or all Dutch chocolate makers, or all Belgian chocolate makers. Again, it doesn't really matter what the theme is, as long as the chocolates are related. And what you do is you label one of them chocolate A, one of them chocolate B, one of them chocolate C, and one of them chocolate D. And again, I just chose these. I happen to have a lot of chocolate left from my recent trip to Brazil. I chose 4 70%. And it just so happens they're all Brazilian chocolate makers. So I have 3 different chocolate makers: Casa Las Avicias in São Paulo, João Leo, I think maybe in Bahia, and then Fazenda Capela Velha, who I know is also, who is in Bahia. In any event, the beans are from Pará, the beans are from Bahia. So they're all themed alike, right? And so the idea is very, very simple, right? Very simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take out chocolate A. So in this case, it's from the Terroir Tuere project. And this is a farmer by the name of João Evangelista. So I'm going to take out that chocolate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to smell it, right? And what I'm going to ask myself is, what do I smell, right? And what I want to do is I want to go I want to start off using very general descriptions. So does it smell sweet, right? Does it smell like there's vanilla in it? Does it smell, yes, Zelia, thank you very much. João Leo is in Ilhéus, which is in Bahia. Thank you very much for that. Am I smelling, does it smell sweet? Does it smell fruity? Does it smell like there's vanilla in it? Does it smell like it's heavily roasted? So these are just, or does it smell roasted? Yes or no? And I can ask myself those questions on a general basis. If I don't start off with, if it's fruity, what kind of fruit it is, what I want to know is just the basic aroma that's associated with it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another chocolate, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to smell it. So here's chocolate B. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask myself, right, what does this smell like? Right? So does it smell sweet? Does it smell like vanilla? Does it smell roasty? Does it smell fruity? Just basic questions about it. Right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start alternating the smelling. So I'm going to go from chocolate B, right, to chocolate A. And what I'm going to say is chocolate A to me smells a little less roasted than chocolate B, right? Neither of them are overly sweet. Both of them are fairly heavily roasted, I think. None of them have any fruit on the nose. None of them sort of like smell like earthy on the nose. I mean, it's mostly roasty, not earthy. There's not a whole lot of fruit. There's no floral or component on the nose, right? And I can go, but, right, A smells less roasty than B, absolutely, right? B smells less sweet than A, right? And what you're doing is you're taking notes. You're taking notes of the differences between these two chocolates, right? Then what you do is you break a piece off, right? And you take a small taste. And again, sorry for the chewing noises here. You're not looking to go deep in terms of identifying what you're tasting. You want to know is, ooh, what is the bite like? What is the chew like? What is the melt like? Does it taste roasty? Does it taste sweet? Does it taste, right? Even though I smell vanilla, do I taste vanilla? Right? You want to go very, very high level in terms of what your perceptions are, right? Then, without clearing your mouth between chocolates, you're going to go to the other chocolate. And again, you're going to make these general observations, right? You're trying to get a flavor reference in your mind, just as you're trying to get an aroma reference in your mind the first time, right? Then, well, this is out of your mouth, but there's still the aftertaste in your mouth in it. You go back to the first one. And what you do is you try to say, okay, what is the difference? What are the differences between chocolate A and chocolate B? Well, interestingly enough, I think chocolate B smelled like it had a deeper roast, but maybe tastes a little sweeter. Chocolate A has got a roasting characteristic. It's not quite burnt. There's a little bit of fruit and flowers in the back end of chocolate A, right? And what's interesting, you'll find, is that there could be, in doing this contrast, that a flavor and aroma that didn't jump out at you. Oh yeah, there's definitely some. I'm salivating on the back end of chocolate A after tasting B. That wasn't there when I was tasting A the first time around. So there's something chemically in there that's causing me to salivate that I wasn't aware of when I was just eating the chocolate on its own. But you have this catalog of differences between the two chocolates. And when you get done, you say, okay, which of these two chocolates, chocolate A or chocolate B, right, do I prefer? Which one of these things, if I was going to pay money for it, and that's a good indicator that you like something as opposed to don't like something, which one of these two chocolates do I prefer, right? And so what we do, right, is we take the chocolate A or B and we'd move it up one level of the pyramid into the space that is labeled 1/2. So this is the one that I prefer of the two. And so it's going to be chocolate A, let's just say. Then what I do is I say, oh, here's chocolate C. It's the chocolate from Joarleo, right? And I get it out, and I have chocolate D, which is the chocolate from Fazenda Capella Velha. Again, they're both 70%, right? And what I am going to do is I'm going to smell one, then smell the other, right? Then smell one, and smell the other. And I'm going to describe in general terms what it is that I'm smelling. Is it sweet, right? Is there some fruitiness? Is there acidity? I'm not trying to describe what that is. That actually requires having a good deal of familiarization, right? If you want to go, oh, this is red fruit, oh, it's dried red fruit, it's dried cranberries, for example, you need to have experience in identifying what dried cranberries taste like in chocolate. That requires very focused, right? Very focused, repetitive tasting so that you understand what these flavors are like. I think for me, the thing that's important about the pyramid tasting approach is that what we're focused on is we're focused on getting to an understanding of what you like. And then what is it about it that you like? So what you like and why you like it. So what I may do is I may go through the smelling of chocolate A, the smelling, or the chocolate C, the smelling of chocolate D, the tasting of chocolate C and D back and forth, right? And what I may do is I may say, you know, I really do prefer chocolate D, right? I haven't done it. I'm just making that as an observation for the purposes of this demonstration. Then what I would do is, having chosen chocolate D and chocolate A, right, clear my palate. And this is just room temperature water with a little bit of lime in it. Not enough to really flavor it, but so there's a little bit of acidity in it. And then what I would do is I would say, of chocolate A and of chocolate D, I would do the same thing. So I'd smell it, right? And then I'd smell this one. And I'd smell this one. And this is where it starts getting really interesting. So I smell, you want to leave about 10 seconds or so, 15 seconds between rounds, so your olfactory senses have a chance to relax. But just smelling this, right, it's fairly mild, right? Now that I've done what it is that the tasting that I've done so far. And I smell this one, and it has almost no aroma. It's really interesting. But if I smell this and then smell this one, all of a sudden this one has a much stronger aroma. And that's an important aspect of comparative tasting, that the order that you smell things in, the order that you taste things in, is going to affect your perception of them, right? And it could be that aroma molecules that are sitting on your nose or in your mouth, right, are going to fundamentally change your perception of the chocolate in this particular case that comes afterwards, right? So it's really important that you go take a beat, think about what you're tasting or smelling. Take a beat, and then immediately afterwards, smell, right? And then do the same thing. Smell this and smell this, right? And it turns out that after doing the chocolate A and the chocolate D, smelling chocolate A and then chocolate D, it turns out that there's even less aroma in the D chocolate than there was when I smell it on its own, right? So when anybody asks you in the future, what's the correct order to taste chocolate? And they go, well, you start with a light chocolate and you go to the dark chocolate, or you start with a lower percentage and you move to a higher percentage. The answer is, right, that's maybe correct, right? But it's not necessarily correct, because changing the order of things is going to change the perception of flavors and the perception of aromas that you have. And so there is no right way, there is no wrong way, right, to do this. But it's really important to be aware of the fact that these are different, right? Just be aware of the fact that the order that you're tasting things is going to affect what you're perceiving. So I have chocolate A, I have chocolate D, and after going the smelling and the tasting route, again, writing notes, because you are going to forget. So take good notes, right, for this, is that ask yourself, which one of these two do I prefer? Do I prefer chocolate A or I prefer chocolate D? Now, in this particular case, I'm going to prefer chocolate A, in part because chocolate D has an experimental cocoa fermentation called sprouting, and it's designed to create a much more mild chocolate. It's a chocolate that doesn't have a whole lot of acidity, a whole lot of astringency, and a whole lot of bitterness And while that's great for a lot of chocolates, right, and great for a lot of applications, in this particular case, it doesn't have as much varietal complexity as the Joao Evangelista, which actually won, I believe, a silver in the 2021 Cocoa of Excellence Awards. So one of the reasons why I chose this particular one, right? So makes sense? Really, really simple. Compare the two together. Which one do I like? Compare the other two. Which one do I like? Then compare those two. Which one do I like? And we're through one iteration of the pyramid, but we're not done, right? What you want to do then is you want to swap. Chocolate A becomes chocolate D. Chocolate B becomes chocolate A. Chocolate C becomes chocolate B, and chocolate D becomes chocolate C, right? And what we do is we go through the whole thing again. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare chocolate A and chocolate D. Well, we've already done that once, and so we know the answer to that question already because A beat D out in the previous round, right? But now what we're going to do is we're going to compare chocolates B, which is in this case the Valdomiro from the Teru Tuere project, again made by Casa Las Delicias, with the Jualero product. And we're going to smell those two, and we're going to decide which ones we prefer, right? And let's say, just for the sake of argument, that the Jualeo wins, just for the sake of argument. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare these two, right? And decide which one I prefer, right? And it goes to the top, right? And then what we do is there's one more combination, right? Right. So we move things over once more, so that what we do is we do the third iteration of the bottom of the pyramid. So we've done A with B, A with C, and A with D at the bottom of the pyramid. Yay. And then we've done B with A, B with C, and B with D, and then C with A, B, and D, and D with A, B, and C. So we get through all of the combinations. We can do that in 3 sets of tastings. And in the end, what will be interesting to see is that for these 4 chocolates, if the same chocolate always reached the top of the pyramid, right, among all of the different tastings we did. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes you'll find that you'll get very different results, right? But, right, so you may find that a particular chocolate wins twice or none or 3 times. And we're not making value judgments on the chocolates themselves. We're not rating the individual chocolates themselves. What we're doing is we're saying, of the flavor characteristics, of the aroma characteristics and the flavor characteristics of the chocolate, this is what I prefer, right? This is what I identify, and this is what I prefer. Because in the end, I think that getting to understanding what you like about a chocolate and to being able to develop a mental model. So I tend to like chocolates that are fruitier. I tend to like chocolates that are darker and richer. I tend to like chocolates that have, very long after finishes, right? Or I tend to like chocolates which are less bitter. I tend to like chocolates which are more chocolatey, right? Because what that says is whenever you taste a new chocolate, right, what you can do is you can compare. What you can do is I'm looking to see if there are any more comments. And there is one from Gafar Adegun. I don't know where you're checking in from, but thank you for the heads up and for the good wishes. I appreciate that. But the idea, again, going back to it, the idea is that I get a good sense for what it is that I like. And ultimately, I think that says that whenever I taste a new chocolate, what I can do is I can compare that new chocolate against the mental model I have of the chocolates that I like. And you say, does this chocolate have the characteristics, right, that I tend to like in chocolate? Yes or no, right? And from then you can go into a deeper evaluation and say, okay, well, all right, I do tend to like things that are fruitier, right? And these are both fruity, but one of them has maybe this one might be sort of might have a citrus fruit kind of flavor to it, or a tropical fruit. Maybe it has flavors of bananas or something like in it. And this has got another fruit flavor in it that I like, but not quite as much, right? You can make these comparisons at a very, very general level, right? I'm gonna make a quick digression here because even though I said what you want to do is you want to start off not thinking about getting very, very specific with flavors, right? It is helpful to have a flavor reference around, right? So you can say, I'm not exactly certain what that flavor is. And often it's there on the tip of your tongue, but you just need something to jog your memory. This is one of the reasons why this pyramid tasting process is really good in groups. Everybody gets the same chocolate, right? And you go through and you can argue about whether A or B is better, which one is better, right? And that's an interesting argument. And I'll tell you why it's an interesting argument, because every single one of us has our own sense of taste. Every single one of us has our own sense of smell. We each grew up in different food cultures. So if you grew up in India, you have a certain set of flavors, spices, and things that you like. If you grew up in Southeast Asian culture, or like Thailand or something like that, you might have a very, very different set of flavor. If I grew up in the United States, in the deep South, as opposed to the Pacific Northwest, these are different food cultures for the most part. And I bring to everything that I taste all of my history in terms of what my food culture is. So what family did I grow up in? What did we like? How did my mother, my father, how did they feed me? What did they think about food? I'm bringing all of these things as probably unconscious assumptions into what it is I'm doing. Although it's really, really fun to think about, what the influences are at that level. But I find when I'm using something like the pyramid tasting method or the comparative tasting method, and I have two people sitting across from each other on the table, and one person says, I hate this, and the person directly across the table says, oh my God, I really love this. This is my favorite. Is that examining that conflict? It's like, oh, why does this person feel this way? And why does this other person feel that way? Right? This is where discussions about flavor become really, really interesting and animated. It's like, this is an 84 and this is an 89, doesn't get you very much, but this reminds me of, being with my grandmother when I was 11 years old. And so I taste this and I'm immediately transported to this experience in my life. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's a really good reason for liking something, right? But being able to identify that connection and holding on to it is really, really important, right? And so I really wanted to emphasize that. But I think it's also really important to have flavor references. And so I'm going to put a link to this page. This is a PDF file that you can download. This is from the Cocoa of Excellence website. And this is their flavor lexicon, which is here. So this is the flavors that they use. So when they're judging, this is how they describe the flavors, and this is the descriptors that they use for the flavors. So this is the text version, and here's a visual version, right? So you can have this near to you, and you can say, oh, this is really interesting. Here are some flavors that I can refer to. So if they're talking about a fresh fruit, as opposed to dried fruit, as a fresh fruit, it reminds me of citrus. As a fresh fruit, it reminds me of a tropical, which would be pineapple, for example, or maracuja, or something like that. Whereas a brown fruit or a yellow fruit might be banana, and white flesh fruits and orange flesh fruit would be apricots and pears and peaches and things like that. But you can get yourself, this reminds me, you get it into a category, and you can start working from the outside in. Right? Fresh fruit as opposed to brown fruit or dried fruit. You work from the outside in. You go from the more general to the more specific. And a flavor wheel like this can be really, really helpful in terms of understanding, that's what that flavor is. Or you might be with a group of people. I love doing this in groups, and somebody will go, I recognize what that is. Right? And so fabulous. You'll notice that jabuticaba is not on this. And I know where I would put jabuticaba on this list. But somebody else might put it in another location. Also a very, very interesting bit of tasting analysis to do. What I also want to say is that here's an interesting interactive coffee tasting wheel. So having a coffee wheel as well as a chocolate wheel. These coffee wheels are often more detailed in terms of the number of flavor references they give and the way they go. They don't go this one doesn't go from the outside to the inside. It goes from the inside to the outside. And there are some differences in descriptors, right? So that's an interesting thing. How do you go do this? How do you go make that work? But for example, if I click on fruity here, what I can do is I can go, okay, here are berries. right? Oh, and then I get the kinds of berries that they are. But very, very interesting what they've done here as a part of the Specialty Coffee Association work is they've actually said, okay, this is what this flavor reference is. So when we talk about blackberry, for example, right, we're talking about either these private selection triple berry reserves. I don't even know who manufactures these. So that's interesting. I don't know who they are, right? But when we think about aroma, this is what we're looking for in terms of flavor. And if we're looking for flavor, right, what we do is we look at Welch's unfiltered 100% blackberry juice. So there are very, very specific flavors that you can go to. So you can go to the store, you can buy this product, you can say, oh, this is what this aroma is. This is what this flavor is, right? When you think about exactly what it is that's going on. I don't know anybody who's done that in chocolate. So if we're looking for a blueberry flavor in chocolate, this is what we mean. If we're looking for a strawberry flavor, I mean, let's go take a look and see where strawberry is. What are the flavor references for strawberry? So they're Dole Whole Natural frozen strawberries. So let them thaw, right, in the refrigerator overnight, and you can smell and taste them. Interesting. That's what you're looking for. May not help you if you are in Europe, right? Because you may not be able to get Dole Whole strawberries, frozen strawberries, but at least you do have the flavor references. So when we're talking about vegetative raw, we're talking about, oh, almonds. So it's interesting that we're talking about vegetative green flavors and we're going to a nut in order to get the flavor. It's just this whole category. And this is in coffee, by the way, not chocolate. So we need to keep that in mind. But I'm going to put a link to this page as well. So what you can do is you can go and take a look at this. There's also a really interesting link. You may not be able to see it in the upper left-hand corner on the science of taste. And they're doing flavor wheel comparisons, also really, really interesting to do. So there are lots of nice references in here that you can use to help guide your exploration and experimentation. Keeping in mind that there are no rights and there are no objective rights or wrong. There is no absolute right. There is no absolute wrong. Your sense of taste is your sense of taste. Your sense of smell is your sense of smell. What you like is what you like. What you don't like is what you don't like, right? And I think that one of the challenges of sort of internet rating culture, so Yelp and places like that, is that we sometimes have a tendency to give up ownership of our sense of taste to the crowd. So we might go to a restaurant based on a review that gets 500 5-star reviews for this particular dish. You go there, maybe the chef has an off night, maybe you just don't like it. And there's a tendency to be able to go, well, there's something wrong with me. All these other people who really, really love this, but I don't, what's wrong with me? And the answer is maybe there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe it's just not to your taste. It doesn't make the dish good. It doesn't make the dish bad, right? Those are judgments that we don't want to make. It's just that it's not to my taste. I don't like it. I mean, as a critic, one of the things that I had to give up, right? One of the recognitions that I needed to come to is that I don't have to eat this. I may not have to eat it ever again. No, as a professional critic, I have this responsibility not to judge anything, to put it in my mouth, and then to try to come up with a judgment on what it is. But I'm not going to prejudge anything. I'm not going to say, well, because it's a white chocolate, it's awful, or because it's a milk chocolate, it's awful, or because it's a dark chocolate and it has added cocoa butter in it, it's not authentic. I mean, these are not judgments that I'm going to make, right? The judgments I'm going to make are pretty much two-part. One of which is this a well-made example? So from a texture perspective and other kinds of things, is it a well-made example? Are there technical defects in its manufacturing? Yes or no? And the other one have to do with, do I like it or not? Right? And that's it. I mean, so there's an objective measure and a subjective measure, and that's it. And I try to be very careful to do my objective when I'm talking, when I choose the language that I'm using to talk about the subjective aspect of what I'm doing, is to focus entirely on, this is not to my taste. I don't like it. We don't need the sideways moment in chocolate where, the Paul Giamatti character goes out of the back with the Thomas Hayden Church character. and the Giamatti character says, if anybody orders the Merlot, I'm leaving. We don't need that in terms of white chocolate. If anybody orders the white chocolate, I'm leaving. I mean, it's not true. What you like is what you like. The idea is to get ownership of your sense of taste, to understand why you like what you like, so that if somebody tries to snob you down, to put you down because they think that because they only like 70% two ingredient chocolates, and somehow you've got a hankering for some white chocolate, they might say, you can't be a real chocolate aficionado if you like white chocolate. You can just go and say, listen, right? This is why I like it. Again, it reminds me of my grandmother, and when I went to visit her on Martha's Vineyard every summer, and we'd go to Chillmark Chocolates, right on the last morning before I got onto the ferry back to the mainland, and I could that connection, again, it's an emotional connection. And this is really, really important. And I think that that's where we want to get ownership of what we're doing, right? In the end, eating chocolate is about how it makes us feel eating the chocolate, right? And so, well, yeah, it's fun to be able to go and identify all these flavors. In the end, it's about how do I feel about it? How does the chocolate make me feel as I eat it? And what I want to do is I want to focus on that. And the comparative tasting method allows me to do that, or enables me to do that. It enables me to focus on how I feel about things, not necessarily how I think about things. And I think that's really, really important for me. All right, so this is the pyramid tasting test. It's obvious, right? I think, on how you go about doing this. I'm going to post this mat. You're free to use it, print it out. Please don't alter it. Take that. There is a copyright notice on it. All right. So I appreciate that if you are going to share this and use it, you at least acknowledge the source of where you got it. There's another tasting method that I use, and I use this tasting method whenever I am going. Oh, by the way, I want to say is that this method, right, works for cheese. It works for wine. It works for anything. You can use the comparative tasting method for anything, right? It's just not limited to chocolate, right? So that's something to consider. So Teresa asked me a question. Can you briefly recap what happens after you get to the top of the pyramid for the first time? So Teresa, what you do is after you've gone A, B, I like this one, C, D, I like this one, and then you go A, B, C, D, I like this one. What you do is you take everything back to the bottom of the pyramid and you put it in its original place. And then you move everything over one position. So B goes to A, C goes to B, D goes to C, and A goes to D. Right? And then you do that pyramid again, and you move, when you get done, you move everything over once again. So for every selection of 4 chocolates, there are 3 tastings that you go through. Right? So hopefully that explains exactly, and then you're done. Right? And at that point, you've had 1, 2, 3 times 3. You've had 9 different tastes. 9 different tastes. Then yes, that's probably enough for one session. And Teresa, you're absolutely right. As I said, right, the order in which you taste things. So A over B, B over A. Right? Which one you have? Smell one, smell the other. It's going to influence what you're smelling. Right? Taste one, taste the other, then taste this one, taste this one. It's going to influence your perception of taste. The idea is that you compare all 4 of them, right, together in different combinations so that you can learn from these 4 which one of these you prefer based upon the fact that your perception of these things is going to change based on the orders in which and the combinations in which you taste them and smell them, right? That's the whole idea. And the human nervous system is designed to work this way. We're really, really good at comparing things. We're really bad about doing things like, have you ever been in a book, right, and looked at something and then, okay, I need to remember this, and then gone to another page and you've immediately forgotten, right, what was on the other page, even though you said, I need to remember this, right? The human nervous system is not designed, right, to make those kinds of connections, which is not. It's designed to do comparisons of things in front of us, right? Whether we're looking at things, whether we're smelling things, whether we're hearing things, right? That's what it's designed to do. And the comparative tasting method is designed to build on top of the millions of years of evolution when it comes to the way our nervous system is put together. Now, right, right. For some people, just getting to the point of this is what I like is not what they want to do. And if you want to get past that, then you need to start getting into the exposure and repetition. Oh, this flavor is, right, Jabuticaba. Oh, this flavor is maracuya. This flavor is coffee. This flavor is espresso, right? So we can do that, and you can do that in the context of the pyramid tasting method, right? To help, if you have flavor references next to you, you can go, oh, that's what that flavor is, right? So you can use it that way, but the primary reason for doing it is very different. The primary reason for the comparative method is to help you understand what your preferences are. Now, the bracket tasting method is a little bit different. It's based on the same ideas, the same idea of comparative tasting, and it's really designed to be able to compare and contrast something that you're eating with something that you're drinking, right? So if we can, and it works this way. So what we do is we create two different brackets, right? In this particular case, bracket 1, bracket 2, and bracket 3, right, are going to be beverage 1, beverage 2, and beverage 3. And so these could be 3 different beers. And if you're doing this, you want these 3 beers to be entirely different in style. So what you do is you might do an IPA, you might do a sour, and then you might do a pale ale. That would be an interesting combination for B1, B2, and B3. Or it could be a white wine, a red wine, and a rosé, right? There's no okay. It can be anything you want as long as they are different, right? And then you have chocolate number 1, right? Then the second bracket is you have beverage number 4. Doesn't matter what this beverage is, as long as it's different from beverage 1, beverage 2, beverage 3. Right? And then what you do is you have chocolate 2, chocolate 3, chocolate 4. Again, doesn't matter what they are as long as they are different. And in this particular case, they don't even need to be the same kind of chocolate. So don't do 70%, all of them. Do a dark chocolate, do a milk chocolate. You could do a chocolate with an inclusion. Just make sure that they're all very different, right? And the point is what we're trying to get to here is how does the beverage affect our perception of the flavor of the chocolate and vice versa. So we smell the beverage, smell the chocolate, right? Taste the beverage, taste the chocolate. And then we're talking about B1, C1, right? Notes, right? Then we take B2 and C1 and we do the same thing, right? So we get a flavor, we get a taste memory in our brains for what the beverage is like on its own, right? We've got the chocolate, we know what the chocolate tastes like on its own. And then what we do is we go, right, how do B2 and C1 work together? How do B1 and C1 work together? And the goal here is, right at the very, very top level, is to come to an understanding. Does the beverage make the chocolate taste better? Right? Does the chocolate make the beverage taste better? Is the combination of the two more pleasant, right, than either of them on their own? Or does the combination of the two, does it like not work for me? Right. And so what you'll do is you'll sometimes find, you've got a very, very high IBU, lots of bitterness, high IBU, international bitterness units, high IBU IPA with some specific hops, and you get a chocolate, and there's something about maybe the bitter chemicals in the hops that work with the astringency chemicals in the chocolate, and all you got to get something which is like that, right? That happens, right? Don't dismiss that. It happens, right? And the goal is not to say, the goal is just to understand that this pairing does not work for me, because what you'll do is you may find other people who like that pairing, right? Just again, it's not that it's a bad pairing. It's not that it's a good pairing. It's just that it's bad for me or it's good for me. That's not a global objective measure of what it is that's going on, right? But it's really, really quite fascinating, right? How your perception of these flavors will change based upon the juxtaposition of the chocolate and the wine or the chocolate beer. So often when I'm doing chocolate and wine pairings, what I'll do is I'll have 2 red wines and believe it or not, 2 milk chocolates, and then a rosé wine and a white wine, and 2 dark chocolates. And we'll do the comparative tasting. So we'll smell one wine and then we'll smell another. That's another thing to do here is smell one, then smell another and put them down, and then smell one and then smell another. And it's often extremely remarkable, right? Especially if you have different styles of wine, how smelling one might radically increase for the amount of fruit, for example, that's on the nose, or in sweetness of the chocolate. It's really, really quite remarkable how that will happen. And it's all based on this notion of comparative tasting and comparative on comparison. The human nervous system is built, right, to make these kinds of comparisons. It does it really, really well, right? And if your objective is to get to you're not going to be able to teach chocolate tasting, in one hour tasting session. It's just not going to work. I mean, you can get some of the basics around it, right? But getting to the idea of giving people a technique that they can use, and this is one of the reasons why I use this method. When I go and give a class, when they get done, they have a method that they can use in this comparative tasting method that they can apply to any kind of situation that they find themselves in at any point. And they can use it to compare anything they want in any kind of way that they like. So what I've done is I've given them a general tool to approach tasting, which is a lot more useful than putting something in your mouth and going, I taste fruit. I'm not sure what kind of fruit that is, because that requires dozens of hours of tasting experience of exposure and repetition in order to be able to get to that point. Right. So my goal as an educator, my goal as a critic has changed completely over the course of the last 20 years, as I've learned that this particular approach is really, really valuable, really, really useful, really, really helpful in a setting. And also, I take this approach, and when I think about pairings, I use this approach when I think about pairings. So, how are these two things going to work together, right? I work through the things this way, right? To find out if I like them or not. So what I'm going to also do is I'm going to say, here are some other interesting ways to use the comparative approach. So, for example, I have here a bar from Benavides in Ilhéus. Actually, they're in Itabuna, but they're in Brazil. And this is their cappuccino bar. And what they've done is they've created a bar, and it's a mixture of white chocolate with cinnamon, right? And dark chocolate, which has got cocoa beans ground into it, or coffee beans ground into it, right? And then here's a Casa Las Avicias milk chocolate bar. And it is a milk chocolate which has coffee beans ground into it. So the milk is mixed into the chocolate itself. And you might imagine that my perception of the cappuccino here, got cinnamon in it, cafe latte here, are going to be different because of the way the milk is incorporated into the bar. Absolutely, that is in fact the case, right? It's going to be very, very different, right, between the two, right? And so explore that as a tasting method, as a comparison method. Go and do it. I mean, another one that's going to be really, really interesting to me. Again, here's another Casa Las Avicias bar. It is just a straight espresso chocolate. It doesn't have a percentage on it that I can see. 70% dark chocolate, right? But I mean, this is a great example of how to use the comparative tasting method, right? So I have this espresso dark chocolate, and then here I have a chocolate branco. So this is from Fazenda Capella Velha. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer the two chocolates like this. So I have the dark chocolate on top of the white chocolate, right? And so from a comparative tasting method perspective, right, put the dark chocolate on your nose and the white chocolate on your tongue. So tongue side down and up, and smell it, right? And then what you do is you bite it, taste it, then turn it over. So the white chocolate is on your nose, right? And the dark chocolate is on your tongue, right? And taste it. Number one, as you bite through it, you'll get a different texture, right? And the dark chocolate is on your tongue with the coffee, so it's more intense to start with. And this one, you're smelling. And it's a different flavor and texture. Right? So something really wonderful to explore is how you do these things, right? Excuse me, right? It's the various different ways in which you can make these comparisons work for you. It's really a lot of fun. I've been playing with these combinations of chocolates. I did one many years ago, which I called a 50-50 bar. And it was this idea. It was two individual bars, which are stuck together. But one was guitared 90% called a Nocturne on one end. And they made another chocolate, a 48% milk chocolate called Orinoco. And just really the whole idea was change which is on your nose and which is on your tongue, and how do you go experience them. And they're really, really very, very different. Here's another, tasting idea for a themed tasting. I only have 3 bars immediately handy, but here again, all Brazilian makers, but not all Brazilian beans. But we have Mission Chocolate Wild Bolivia, Mission Chocolate Wild Brazil, and then also here's Luisa Abram and her Rio Juruá Wild Amazonian from Pará. So here's a themed. We could take chocolate all made from beans, which are sourced wild, rather than being farmed. Another great theme idea for putting together a pyramid tasting. A tasting pyramid. Yeah. My mouth is full. Yum. And that's it. I mean, that's how I taught myself to taste, right? I developed this thing I call the comparative tasting method. Let me join over here. Developed this thing I call the comparative tasting method. It is based on the notion of, based on ideas about simultaneous contrast, which come out of my background, my fine arts training as a photographer at the Rhode Island School of Design. It didn't come from a culinary background. It didn't come from a chocolate background. Didn't come from other place. It's just this idea, right? And I knew that it applied to color, but could I apply it to taste? And the answer is absolutely yes. And for me, thinking about tasting in this particular way, right, has been transformative for me in the way I think about flavor, in the way I talk about flavor, in the way I educate people in notions of tasting and flavor. And I encourage you to go and experiment on these ideas yourself, and to let me know in the comments here, either on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Let me know what you think of the idea. If you have questions about it, certainly, of course. But I would also recommend that today's sponsor of the Chocolate Life live stream is the Chocolate Life. And so if you'd like to support what it is that I'm doing, please go like and subscribe, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. Not only like, subscribe, but ring the bell when you're on YouTube so we can bow to the YouTube gods, algo and rhythm, and we can spread the good news of this much wider. So I appreciate if you're doing that, but also show your support on the Chocolate Life. There's a join link at the top of the page. There's always a free category. When you join free, I get occasional newsletters, and then you can read members only content. But if you want to support what it is that I'm doing, you can pay either on a monthly or an annual level to support the work that I'm doing. I don't use Patreon. I don't use any other method. All of the support, direct support for the Chocolate Life is done here on the Chocolate Life by becoming a member. And so I appreciate everyone who supports what it is that we're doing that way. So a final comment, Natalia, again, thank you very much for sharing. Natalia, I hope you found this to be a really interesting and really valuable approach to thinking about tasting. And so, yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to mention joining the Chocolate Life is that at the bottom of every page on the Chocolate Life, there is a comments box. We don't have any comments yet on this particular post. But if you want to add a comment to a page on the Chocolate Life, you need to be a member, and free membership certainly, gives you access to be able to add comments to these kinds of pages. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think. I appreciate it. Just a real quick also overview is I do maintain a calendar. The calendar does have today's schedule. Oh, I didn't update it. So how I taught myself tasting. We have last week's topic. We have this coming Friday's topic, which is going to be on the Federal Code of Regulations, the Code of Federal Regulations. And we're going to talk specifically about what chocolate is and what chocolate isn't. If you're a chocolate maker in the United States, there are also some statutes on the books in the code, and the FDA and other places. There are things that you shouldn't know about. If you're manufacturing chocolate in the United States, we're going to be talking about some of those topics this coming Friday. So yeah, absolutely. I hope you join me this coming Friday. Spread the word. Natalia, I am hoping that I am going to be able to come back to Belém at the end of September for the ChocolateLife Festival. I know that the organizers are just finishing up with ChocolateLife Linares in Espiritu Santo. I think it ended this past Sunday, and so they're back in the office. And I hope to engage with them about coming back to Brazil for the festival in Belém. I know that I will be coming back in December for the festival in São Paulo. And I just want to really do a quick note to everybody is that I plan to be, some of you may know that I did a 20th anniversary chocolate tasting. I plan to be doing a Brazilian chocolate tasting in which I will be bringing back chocolate with me from Brazil when I come back in December. And I will be shipping it to everyone, and we'll get together online and we'll do a mutual chocolate tasting with Brazilian chocolate. So if that's something that's interesting to you, go let me know. You can send me an email. There's a link on TheChocolateLife.com under this little 3-dot menu that says contact, I think. Contact the Chocolate Life. You can go on that page. You can find out how to email me and let me know that you're interested in the Brazilian chocolate tasting that I'm going to be doing then. And with that, I want to thank everybody who's been with me for any part of the hour, but for people who've been since the very beginning, I want to just say it's been a lot of fun preparing for this and for delivering it today. I hope you found it interesting. You found it exciting. You found it informative and something educational, something you're going to be able to use moving forward. And I'm going to end this live stream as I end all of my live streams with the idea that if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Ciao, everyone.